The sun had barely set over Nairobi when Zuri lit a single candle on her small homemade cake. It was her 27th birthday. No big party, no noise, just her and the quiet hum of her tiny apartment. She smiled softly, expecting her parents to knock any minute. They always came, even if just to bring food or share tea. But when the door finally opened, the warmth she expected wasn't there. Mama Nalia and Baba Mosi stood in the doorway, their faces hard and cold. Zuri's smile faded. "Mama, Baba, what's wrong?" she asked, stepping closer. Her father's voice was sharp. "You've embarrassed this family long enough. You're nothing but a burden." The words hit her like a slap. Before she could speak, her mother dropped a small bag on the floor. Inside were her childhood photos, old clothes, and her birth certificate. Zuri stared at it, her throat tightening. "Mama, please, what's going on?" she whispered. Her mother looked away. "We've decided to focus on our real child now. Mika is engaged to a good woman from a good family. We can't carry your shame anymore." The room spun. Zuri's hands trembled as she tried to hold back tears. "My shame. I've done nothing but work hard for this family." But they were already walking out. The door closed behind them, leaving her in heavy silence. Zuri fell to her knees beside the small cake, tears streaming down her face. On her 27th birthday, the day meant for love and laughter, her parents had given her the cruelest gift of all, rejection. Before life hardened her, Zuri was that little girl who laughed at everything. She dreamed of designing machines that could change lives. Every morning before school, she would help her father in his small metal workshop, polishing tools and sketching ideas on scraps of paper. While her brother Mika played video games or slept late, Zuri worked beside her father, wiping sweat from her face and smiling through the noise of grinding metal. She loved the smell of oil and iron. It made her feel close to her father, like she belonged in his world. Money was always tight in the Mosi household. Some days there was only one plate of ugali and sukuma wiki on the table, and Zuri quietly pushed it toward her brother. "Let Mika eat," she'd say. "He has exams." Her mother would nod, never asking if Zuri had eaten too. That became normal, Zuri sacrificing quietly while everyone called Mika the pride of the family. In school, Zuri was brilliant. Her teachers adored her. She won science fairs, stayed after class to tutor others, and dreamed of earning a scholarship to study engineering at the University of Nairobi. When the acceptance letter finally came, she cried tears of joy. It felt like the beginning of everything she had prayed for. But joy didn't last long. One semester later, she was called to the bursar's office. The scholarship funds hadn't covered all her fees, and the remaining balance had to be paid immediately. Zuri rushed home, clutching the paper, hoping her parents would understand. She found her mother cooking and her father reading a newspaper. "Baba, Mama," she said softly, "I need help paying my tuition. Just for one semester. I promise I'll find work after this." Her father didn't even look up. "Ask Mika," he muttered. Zuri blinked. "Mika doesn't even have a job. Please, I can't lose this chance." That's when her mother spoke, her tone cold and final. "Zuri, we've talked about this. Girls don't bring glory. Boys carry the name." The words stabbed deeper than any blade. Zuri's lips trembled. "Oh, I should just stop studying." Her father shrugged. "You'll get married one day. Your husband will take care of you. Mika is our future." That night, Zuri sat on her bed, staring at the university letter until her tears blurred the ink. Everything she'd worked for, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, meant nothing to them. She packed away her books and told herself she would never beg again. The next morning, she walked to the school one last time, returned her student ID, and thanked her professors. She smiled through the pain, whispering to herself, "One day, I'll build something of my own. And when I do, I'll never let anyone decide my worth again." That was the day Zuri's innocence died, and her strength was born. When Zuri left her parents' house, she carried only a small bag of clothes and a heart full of pain. She didn't know where life would take her, but she knew one thing: she would never depend on anyone again. For weeks, she searched for work in Nairobi, knocking on doors, filling out forms, and getting rejected over and over. One day, she saw a cleaner wanted sign outside a modern glass building that belonged to a small tech startup. Without hesitation, she walked in and asked for the job. The pay was low, barely enough to cover rent and food, but Zuri accepted. Every morning, she arrived before everyone else, sweeping floors, wiping desks, and cleaning coffee stains. But while she worked, she listened. She listened to the young developers talk about coding languages, digital marketing, and startup funding. At lunch breaks, when others were chatting or scrolling through their phones, Zuri would quietly read old manuals or watch free tutorials on a borrowed laptop. One afternoon, an elderly man with kind eyes noticed her sitting in the corner, scribbling notes. He introduced himself as Mr. Baraka, a retired investor who often visited the startup to advise the founders. "You're not just cleaning," he said, smiling. "You're observing." Zuri nodded shyly. "I want to learn how all this works. I may not have a degree, but I have ideas." Mr. Baraka admired her spirit. Over time, he began mentoring her, teaching her how businesses grow, how money moves, and how to make people believe in a vision. "You don't need a name to build an empire," he told her once. "Just a dream and grit." Those words lit something inside Zuri that no hardship could ever kill. After work, she started offering small services to local businesses, helping them make flyers, set up Facebook pages, and design basic websites. She saved every shilling she could, cutting back on meals and skipping personal treats. Her room was small, her mattress thin, but her dreams were huge. When she finally had enough savings, Zuri registered her own business, Z-Tech Media. The day she printed her first business card, she cried. It was just a small startup, but to her, it was everything she'd fought for. She worked day and night, often sleeping just a few hours, sending proposals, managing clients, and learning through every mistake. There were moments she wanted to give up, days when clients ghosted her, electricity was cut off, or her laptop broke down. But then she'd remember her parents' words, "Girls don't bring glory," and she'd push harder, determined to prove them wrong. With every project she completed, Zuri built more than just a company. She was building a new version of herself. A woman who refused to be defined by anyone's limits. A woman who knew that sometimes, starting from the floor doesn't mean you'll stay there forever. Years passed, and the girl who once scrubbed office floors became the woman everyone in Nairobi's business world whispered about. Zuri's small company, Z-Tech Media, started to grow faster than she ever imagined. Her hard work, honesty, and creativity drew in clients from all over the country. Hotels, banks, even government projects. She built her name from nothing, one deal at a time. Zuri didn't just want success. She wanted to understand it. She studied every contract, every investment, every strategy her competitors used. Soon, she began hiring a team, young, hungry minds like hers who believed in her vision. They worked late nights, brainstorming campaigns, creating digital magic that got everyone's attention. Within 5 years, Z-Tech Media wasn't just a small firm anymore. It was one of the most respected digital agencies in East Africa. Her big break came when a global tech brand noticed her work and offered a partnership. Instead of selling out, Zuri negotiated smartly, merging on her own terms. The deal made her company international overnight. She was just 29, but she carried herself with the calm confidence of someone twice her age. With new money flowing in, Zuri began investing quietly. She didn't crave fame, she wanted freedom. Through a private investment company she created, ZK Holdings, she started buying shares in promising Kenyan businesses. She learned how to move in silence, making powerful decisions from the shadows. Then one day, an opportunity came that stopped her cold. A well-known company called Mosi Holdings, a large agricultural and manufacturing firm, was struggling. Investors were pulling out, and shares were dropping fast. Zuri saw potential, but when she dug deeper, she froze. Mosi Holdings was where her father and mother now worked, the same parents who had thrown her out years ago. She stared at the name on the report. Baba Mosi, senior technician. Mama Nalia, administrative assistant. Her heart ached not with anger but with something deeper. Life had brought them full circle, and she had the upper hand. Zuri decided to buy a majority stake in the company, but she didn't want them to know it was her. She signed every document as ZK Holdings, never revealing her identity. "Let's see who they are," she whispered to herself. "Let's see how they treat people when they think no one's watching." For months, she watched from behind the curtain, how her parents spoke about their new, mysterious CEO, how her brother Mika bragged about being from a powerful family. Zuri stayed quiet, observing, remembering. She wasn't doing it for revenge. She wanted the truth, because deep down Zuri still wondered, if they met her again, not as the daughter they threw away, but as the woman who now signed their paychecks, would they treat her any differently? That question became her fuel. And soon she would find her answer. One sunny afternoon, Zuri visited her old neighborhood for the first time in years. She parked her black SUV a few streets away and walked to a familiar little cafe where she knew her parents often came for tea after work. She hadn't told them she was back in town. She just wanted to see them from afar. But fate had other plans. As she stepped in, she heard a voice she hadn't forgotten, her mother's laughter. Mama Nalia sat at a corner table with her father, Baba Mosi, and her brother Mika, proudly talking about their jobs. Zuri quietly ordered tea and sat nearby, hidden behind a newspaper. Her father was beaming with pride. Ever since that new CEO took over, the company has completely changed. Mosi Holdings is respected again. Even the salaries improved. Her mother nodded eagerly. "That woman is brilliant, whoever she is. They say she's private, but she's saving this company." Then Mika leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "You'll see. One day that CEO will know who we are, the Mosi family. Maybe she'll even promote us. We deserve to be close to someone that powerful." Zuri almost laughed, but her chest felt heavy instead. They were sitting there, bragging about working for her, the same daughter they'd once called a burden. She sipped her tea quietly, smiling to herself. When they finished and left, Zuri sat for a long time, staring out the window. Her parents looked happy but unaware. They had no idea that their mysterious boss, the one they praised and dreamed of meeting, was the same girl they had disowned. That night Zuri couldn't sleep. She kept replaying their words in her head, the pride, the excitement, the unknowing. For a moment, she felt a strange tenderness, but then she remembered the night they left her with a bag of old clothes. The ache returned deeper this time. The next morning she made a decision. If fate had brought them back into her world, she wouldn't hide forever. It was time to meet them again, not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman who had built an empire from her pain. A week later, Zuri called a company-wide meeting, a grand event to celebrate Mosi Holdings' new direction and to finally introduce the CEO everyone had been curious about. Invitations were sent to all departments. Her parents received theirs and were thrilled. Mama Nalia ironed her best dress. Baba Mosi polished his shoes until they shined. Mika posted on social media, bragging, "Big event today. We might finally meet the boss." The Mosi family always rises. Meanwhile, Zuri stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her elegant suit. Her reflection looked calm, powerful, yet beneath that strength was a trembling heart. She whispered to herself, "They'll see me now, not as a burden, but as the woman they never believed I could become." And with that she walked out, ready for the reunion of a lifetime. The ballroom of the luxury hotel in Nairobi shimmered with gold lights and soft music. Dozens of employees filled the hall, dressed in their best clothes, excited and whispering about finally meeting their mysterious CEO, the woman who had saved Mosi Holdings from collapse. The air buzzed with curiosity and admiration. Cameras were set up, reporters stood ready, and on the big stage stood a sleek podium with a glowing company logo. At one of the tables near the front sat Baba Mosi and Mama Nalia, dressed proudly. Baba Mosi whispered, "She must be a foreign investor or someone famous." Mama Nalia nodded, adjusting her scarf, smiling proudly as if she somehow shared in the CEO's greatness. Mika, their son, sat beside them, straightening his suit and checking his reflection on his phone camera. "When she meets me," he said with a grin, "she'll know the Mosi family deserves higher positions." Then the lights dimmed. The host walked on stage and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the woman behind the rebirth of Mosi Holdings, our CEO, Ms. Zuri Mosi." The room fell silent. For a moment no one moved. Then, as the spotlight turned toward the stage, Zuri appeared, poised, graceful and confident, wearing an elegant white suit that gleamed under the lights. Her parents froze. Mama Nalia's hand flew to her chest. Baba Mosi's mouth fell open. Mika's phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. "Zuri," her mother whispered, her voice trembling. Zuri looked at them, her face calm but her eyes holding years of pain. She took the microphone and smiled slightly. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "I know most of you have been wondering who the person behind ZK Holdings is. The one who owns this company. Well, you're looking at her." Gasps rippled across the room. Cameras started flashing. Reporters leaned forward. Zuri took a deep breath. "Many years ago, I was told I was a burden. I was told I brought no glory. But every tear I cried, every night I stayed awake learning and working, all of that led me here." She paused, locking eyes with her parents. "The same daughter you threw away now signs your paychecks." The crowd erupted into shocked whispers. Mika turned pale, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Mama Nalia looked as if she might faint. Zuri's voice grew softer but stronger. "You called me worthless. But those words built my fire. You turned me away, and I turned my pain into purpose." There was silence, heavy and electric. Then the crowd began to clap, slowly at first, then louder and louder until the room shook with applause. Zuri smiled through the lights and the flashes, standing tall on the same ground where her parents now sat small and stunned. For the first time in her life, she wasn't begging for love or approval. She was commanding respect. And everyone in that room knew, this was not just a business success story. It was a daughter's quiet, powerful revenge. And her redemption. The applause echoed through the ballroom like a storm. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and Zuri stood there, smiling, not out of pride but relief. Years of pain, silence, and hard work had finally brought her to this moment. For once, she didn't need anyone's approval. She had become her own validation. As the crowd rose to their feet, she stepped down from the stage. Her parents were still frozen in place, pale and speechless. Baba Mosi's eyes glistened as he struggled to stand. He reached out a trembling hand. "Zuri, we didn't mean to." Zuri stopped him with a calm but firm voice. "You meant every word, Baba," she said softly, her eyes steady. "And I meant mine. I'd never beg again." Her words sliced through the air, gentle but powerful. Baba Mosi's mouth opened, but no sound came. Mama Nalia lowered her head, shame flooding her face. Mika stared at the floor, unable to look at his sister, the sister he once mocked, now standing as the boss of everything he'd bragged about. Zuri didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't stay for explanations. She simply turned away. The weight she had carried for years, the ache of rejection, the pain of not being enough, seemed to fall off her shoulders as she walked across that golden-lit hall. The employees, unaware of the heartbreak unfolding just a few steps away, cheered for her as she passed. They saw a woman who had built an empire from nothing, a symbol of hard work and determination. Some even reached out to shake her hand, congratulating her for her inspiring story. Zuri smiled at them warmly, never letting them see the tears that glimmered in her eyes. At the edge of the stage stood Mr. Baraka, her mentor, the man who once believed in her when no one else did. His face was full of pride, his eyes soft with affection. As Zuri approached him, he opened his arms and said, "I told you, my girl. You didn't need a name. You became the name." Zuri finally let the tears fall as she hugged him tightly. "Thank you for seeing me when even my own family couldn't," she whispered. He chuckled gently. "No, Zuri. You saw yourself. That's the real miracle." Behind them, her parents sat in silence, too ashamed to move, too broken to speak. The applause grew louder, but for them, it only echoed their regret. They had thrown away a diamond because they thought it was a stone. As Zuri stepped out of the ballroom, the night breeze hit her face, soft, freeing and full of promise. She looked up at the Nairobi skyline, glittering with lights, and whispered to herself, "This is what rising from the ashes feels like." And with that, she walked forward, not as the rejected daughter anymore, but as the woman who turned pain into power and silence into success. The story of the CEO who was disowned by her parents spread like wildfire across Nairobi. Within days, the video of Zuri's reveal went viral. Millions watched her powerful words, and people couldn't stop talking about her courage. But while the world celebrated Zuri, her family's world began to crumble. Mika, the golden child who once bragged about his family name, was the first to fall. His fiancée's parents saw the viral clip and realized the truth, that the man they were about to welcome into their wealthy family had mocked and abandoned the very sister who now owned the company he bragged about. Overnight, the engagement was called off. His fiancée sent him a short message. "I can't marry a man who only values people when they're useful to him." Mika tried to explain, to spin the story, but no one believed him anymore. His perfect image shattered like glass. At work, whispers followed him everywhere. People who once treated him with respect now looked at him with pity. Soon after, both he and his parents were quietly let go from Mosi Holdings. Not by Zuri's command, but because the company couldn't ignore the scandal. The same faces that once looked down on Zuri were now facing the consequences of their own pride. Weeks later, they showed up at her office. Mama Nalia looked smaller, her scarf wrinkled and her eyes swollen. Baba Mosi's proud posture was gone. He stood there trembling, hat in hand. Mika stayed silent, shame written all over his face. Zuri didn't look angry when she saw them. She simply gestured for them to sit. The air in the room felt heavy, full of unspoken memories. Her father's voice broke as he began. "Zuri, we made terrible mistakes. We let our pride blind us. Please forgive us." Tears rolled down Mama Nalia's cheeks. "You were always the good one, Zuri. We just didn't see it." Zuri took a deep breath, her voice soft but strong. "I've already forgiven you in my heart," she said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I can't let you hurt me again." Her parents nodded silently, realizing she wasn't shutting them out. She was setting them free from the cycle of pain they had started. As they left, Zuri looked out of her office window, the Nairobi skyline glowing under the sunset. She didn't feel anger or victory, only peace. The past had finally ended. For the first time in her life, Zuri wasn't chasing approval or running from pain. She had won, not through revenge but through grace. Months passed, and Zuri's life looked completely different. The pain that once controlled her had turned into something powerful, purpose. She had money, status, and success, but what she wanted most now was meaning. She remembered what it felt like to grow up unseen, unwanted, and unheard. No one had ever told her she was enough, no one had believed in her dreams. And she knew there were thousands of girls just like her, smart, capable, but trapped in families or communities that made them feel small. So Zuri decided to change that. She launched the Rise Foundation, an education and mentorship program for girls from low-income families. She started small, 5 girls, 1 classroom and a dream. But the idea grew faster than she expected. Soon dozens of schools joined the movement. Her company sponsored laptops, internet access, and workshops where young girls could learn leadership, business, and coding. Zuri visited the schools herself, sitting on small plastic chairs, laughing and sharing her story with the students. "I was once like you," she told them. "I didn't have anyone to help me, but I had faith, and that faith became my strength." The girls listened with shining eyes, inspired by the woman who had once been rejected but now stood as a symbol of resilience. One day, Zuri announced a special scholarship, the Baraka Mosi Scholarship, named after her father. People were surprised. Reporters asked if it was to honor him. Zuri smiled and said, "Not to honor him but to rewrite the story. This time, the daughters will carry the name." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about healing, not just for her, but for generations of girls who deserved to be seen and valued. By reclaiming her father's name, she turned something that once represented pain into a legacy of empowerment. Her father saw the announcement on TV and cried quietly at home. For the first time, he saw his daughter not as the child he'd rejected, but as the woman who had rewritten history with grace. Zuri stood on stage during the scholarship launch, surrounded by hundreds of students. As the crowd cheered, she looked up and whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. She had finally found peace, not by escaping her past, but by transforming it into something beautiful. Her scars had become her strength, and her story had become a light for others to follow. Months later, Zuri stood on the stage of a grand women's empowerment conference in Nairobi. The hall was filled with hundreds of women, students, entrepreneurs, mothers, dreamers, all waiting to hear from the young CEO who had turned her pain into power. Cameras flashed, and the air buzzed with excitement. Zuri smiled as she stepped up to the microphone. For a moment, she paused and looked at the crowd. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of everything she had been through. "They disowned me when I had nothing," she began, her eyes glistening. "But sometimes rejection is just direction. Every door that closed on me pushed me toward building my own. And when no one believed in me, I learned to believe in myself." The audience grew quiet, hanging on every word. To every woman here who's ever been told she's not enough, don't let their words define you. Let them motivate you. Your worth doesn't depend on who accepts you, but on how you rise after being broken. The hall erupted in applause. Some women wiped tears, others stood and clapped, inspired by her courage and honesty. At the very back of the room, her parents sat silently. They hadn't told Zuri they were coming, they just wanted to see her, even from a distance. Her mother held her father's hand, both their faces wet with tears. They finally saw what they had lost. The daughter they once called nothing had become everything they once hoped to be: strong, respected, and loved. As the applause thundered around her, Zuri smiled through her tears. She wasn't speaking for revenge or validation. She was speaking for every woman who had been rejected, to remind them that sometimes being cast out is the first step toward being unstoppable.